President Obama, the presidential candidate who once campaigned on bringing the troops home, the senator who opposed the war in Iraq, will now send up to 35,000 more American troops to fight an undeclared and unlawful war in Afghanistan and in parts of the tribal areas near Pakistan, bringing the total of U.S. forces to more than 100,000. President Obama, who once promised an exit strategy, is now committing the single largest deployment of American troops since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Joining me now to talk about this is Jacob Hornberger, the founder and president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Jake, it's always a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge. It's nice to be back.
Does anybody consider that we never declared war, that there is no lawful objective, there is no lawful authority, and if you can call anything you want a war, then the president can send troops wherever he wants them to go, the Constitution be damned?
Well, that seems to be the case. I mean, that's the somewhat forgotten provision of the Constitution here. We all know that this is what the framers intended, that before the president can wage war, before he can commit this country to war, spending unlimited amounts of money, he has to secure a declaration of war from Congress. He has failed to do that. As you point out, that makes this war and this 8-year occupation illegal under our form of government.
You know, I partially agreed with the decision of Attorney General Holder. I think you share my views on this, Jake. To try the people in Guantanamo Bay, as to whom they have a case and as to whom they have lawful evidence against them, in federal district courts, because the tool of war, a military tribunal, does not arise until you have a lawful war. I disagree with the Attorney General, who wants to try some of them in military tribunals. Question: why doesn't the government understand that it can only use the tools of war after it lawfully declares war? Why does it act as if it can call anything it wants a war and then claim to use the tools of war to support the thing it's calling a war?
Because it wants to be the judge, jury, and executioner in these criminal cases. We all know that terrorism is a federal criminal offense. That's why people are being charged, indicted, and tried, convicted, and sentenced in federal district court. But what they've done is come up with this nice little end around the Bill of Rights, where they have the discretion. They decide whether, in this dual system, whether a criminal defendant charged with terrorism is going to get this route that involves no guarantees, no protections provided by the Bill of Rights, or this route that does. That violates equal treatment under law. It violates the rule of law. It gives the government the ability to simply do an end around the Bill of Rights.
You know, if the government could call anything it wants a war, we have a war on drugs. Can the government send drug dealers down to Guantanamo Bay? We have a war on the mafia. Can the government send mobsters to Guantanamo Bay? The government has arguably declared war on Fox News. Can it send, well, I won't mention any names. Can it call anything it wants a war and then put those people before military tribunals? Of course it can't.
Well, but it would certainly not be beyond the realm of possibility here, especially since you have the war on drugs now being conflated with the war on terrorism. And then you given all the violence, for example, in Mexico associated with the drug war, the killings of government officials, bombings here and there, kidnappings, torture. It certainly is not beyond the realm of possibility that the government could easily extend the same reasoning it's applied in the war on terrorism to the war on drugs, or as you suggest, maybe even just the war on crime.
Well, you know, we're about to hear from the president tonight on Afghanistan. And in my opinion, everything he's going to articulate is done for political, not for lawful reasons. But when the Afghanistan thing fades, when the Congress finally decides how close it wants to get us to socialized medicine, I think their next crusade is going to be gun control. And one of the arguments they're going to make for gun control is too many weapons are getting to Mexico and are used in the war on drugs in Mexico. So in order to help the Mexican government, we have to stop Americans from defending themselves with the lawful use of weapons guaranteed by the Second Amendment. Yet again, a convoluted argument involving the concept of war and another country, the result of which is a loss of liberty at home.
Yeah, I mean, Ludwig von Mises, the famous economist, expressed this dictum that one government intervention leads to another. Now, obviously, he was talking about economics, but the same principles apply in all these interventions. Here you have this 35, 40-year-old failed war on drugs that produces the violence. They then use that as the excuse for a new intervention, a war on guns, and they're already moving in the direction of what you're talking about along the border. They're talking about putting more strict controls on gun dealers along the border, again with this illusion, this delusion that they're somehow going to finally win this war on drugs by tightening up on gun control. It's ridiculous. If you've seen the violence in the war on drugs, wait till you see it with the war on guns.
You know, I think the key word here is fear. I think when the president makes his argument for Afghanistan, he's going to try and scare people a little bit into believing that somehow the 100 persons who are members of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan should be pursued by 100,000 American troops because we won't be as safe if we don't get those 100. Now, if you don't want to take my word for the 100, that comes from General James Jones, the recently retired Commandant of the Marine Corps, who's the president's national security advisor. So, Jacob Hornberger, does it make any sense to send 100,000 troops to a wretched place like Afghanistan to pursue 100 people? Can anybody even argue that that keeps us freer or safer here in America?
Judge, 40 years ago, I heard this argument when I was a cadet at the Virginia Military Institute, that if we didn't keep the communists from taking over South Vietnam, the dominoes would start falling, there'd be sanctuary for communism, the conquest of the United States would ultimately take place by the communists, and it was all a lie. As reality finally came to fruition here, we know it was a lie. But this is the kind of fear tactics they use, that, oh, if the Taliban get into power, al-Qaeda is going to have this massive sanctuary. These are all the fear tactics that are used to justify these kind of interventions. And the other thing we shouldn't forget about this is that we simply can't afford this kind of imperialism anymore. I mean, they're borrowing money out to the hilt. They've got this national socialist health care plan that's going to cost even more billions of dollars. These troops, new troops, are costing some $30 billion. Where are they getting all this money? They just keep piling debt on debt on debt, and ultimately the day of reckoning is going to come due, and we've got to stop this before it goes too far.
I guess that this president will pay for this war on a credit card just like his predecessor did, because if he ever raises taxes to pay for the war, some of his more ardent military supporters might say, enough is enough. What do you think?
Of course, and that's where the Federal Reserve comes in. That's the agency that's going to monetize this debt, starting to pay off all this debt in debased dollars. We're going to see prices rising across the board, all the whip inflation now buttons, the price controls, the shortages, and there's no telling what the chief foreign lender is going to say about all this, the Chinese Communist regime. They're not dumb. They know that the federal government's going to try to pay them in debased dollars. What are they going to do? If they dump all those securities on the market, we're facing a monetary crisis, the likes of which I think are unimaginable at this point.
Jacob Hornberger, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thank you.
You can catch today's show on foxnews.com/Freedom Watch and on Sirius 145, XM 168, or online at foxnewstalk.com at 6 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. From New York, defending freedom until the next time. Stay free, America.